Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and here's what's coming up this week on One Detroit. Nolan, Finley, Stephen Henderson, and I meet up. The top 3 most pressing things that need to be addressed in Michigan in 2021. Then Will Glover with Lieutenant Governor Garlin Ghilchrist on seeking trust in government and depending on each other. And then the impact the Russian Five had on the Detroit Red Wings and U.S. hockey. It's all ahead right now on One Detroit.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The KRESGE Foundation, Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. NISSAN Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you.
Hey, One Detroit, I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for being with me. So I got into the Christmas spirit this past weekend. My kids and I decorated the house and the tree. It really makes you reflect on the year we've had and where we're headed. Coming up on the show, I meet up with our One Detroit contributors, Nolan, Finley, and Stephen Henderson. We talk about where we've been this year, politics, pandemic, racial injustice, and the top 3 agenda items for 2021. Then a few minutes with Lieutenant Governor Garlin Ghilchrist, his personal reflections on the year and what he says his children have learned from 2020. And we wrap it up with a look at the Russian Five documentary coming to Detroit Public Television. They changed the Red Wings and the face of U.S. hockey. It is all coming up. But let's start off with our One Detroit contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal. There's so much to unpack on where we've been this year. And when we all started out in January of 2020, I don't think the problems that we're looking at now were on our radar even then, Nolan.
Oh gosh, who could have imagined something like this? Even though we were starting to see what was happening overseas, I don't think anybody believed that it would come to the United States with the ferocity it had, plus the other things that we went through this year. This certainly wasn't a healthy election season by any measure. And, plus the racial strife that emerged just as the virus was hitting its peak. It was a lot of challenges for the nation.
Politics, pandemic, racial disparities, all really exploding. And now they are all intertwined, really, when we talk about how we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to start thinking of these things in terms of how to solve them and how to live together in this country. I mean, it's hard not to think sometimes that things are just coming apart really fast. And part of it is because of the confluence of all of these things. I think any one of these things, it would be easier to deal with and to get people to have, to see their common interests in dealing with it. But you put all 3 of them together, and I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's confusing.
What are you seeing specifically that people are confused about how they should react to, or then reacting in a totally different way? Are you talking about racial disparities? Are you talking about people dealing with their kids' education? Are we talking about health?
Throw all of that in there, and then add on top of that this incredible political divide that we had before, right? It's not like people were seeing eye to eye before all this happened, but this year, the politics of this year, the reaction to politics of this year, and in particular, the assault on the election results and on Black voters at the end of the year really opened up a chasm that I didn't predict. I knew it would be an election in which people felt strongly, and that if President Trump lost, he wasn't going to take it well.
And this put Michigan smack in the middle of this conversation, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, what happened in Michigan has been a little bit absurd. You know, there obviously no evidence of widespread fraud, widespread irregularities in Michigan. It's a desperation, Tim. You got a lot of mistrust out there on the some of it based on legitimate fears, a lot of it being ginned up by folks with an interest in keeping the process disrupted. But, you know, a lot of people felt the same way 4 years ago with this Russian collusion nonsense and the attempt to undermine the Trump administration before it went in. Let's not pretend this is the first time we've had an election where people refused to accept in practicality the results. You know, this has been going on. When this time you've got a president who is trying to undermine confidence in the election process. Last time you had an administration that used the powers of the government to undermine its successor. I mean, we've got to get back in this country to accepting losses and moving on and working through the process. And we've gotten very poor at that.
Stephen, do you think that that's a fair comparison that Nolan just made?
No,
between 2016 and now?
It's an outrageous comparison, and it's part of the problem, right? False equivalence on the right. It is a false equivalence. So here's the difference. The allegations about what happened during the 2016 election were investigated by the Justice Department, by an independent prosecutor. There are 32 convictions that have been achieved in that investigation. People are going to prison because of it. I mean, the idea that there was nothing to that or that it was ginned up is absurd. I mean, there was something.
Hold on. We now have enough investigations and enough reports to know that this was a ginned up investigation based on false information, and a lot of people
going to jail.
A lot of people forced into making guilty pleas to avoid longer sentences.
So, but the difference,
based on an investigation that was not rooted. It was not based in facts. So.
Okay, Nolan.
Let me finish what the difference is. You could spend the next 10 years investigating the things that Donald Trump and his friends have said about this election and not find anything. I mean, there is no evidence of what they're saying. No one would go to jail. No one would plead guilty.
I want to bring this a little bit more back into where we are in Michigan and looking forward in the time that we have left. What are some of the largest concerns that you see on the horizon, specifically for the city of Detroit in 2021?
I think our biggest concern in the city of Detroit is whether or not you can repopulate all those office buildings, restaurants, bars, when this thing's finally over. It's been now, by the time we get to a comfortable place for a broad reopening and people returning to their workplaces, it's going to be a lot of damage done.
I think you can add two things to the problems here in Detroit. One is the effect on the people who live here. I spent a lot of time in Detroit neighborhoods and in Detroit neighborhoods that weren't benefiting from all of the things that have happened downtown in the first place. And the level of need over the last 9 months has just shot through the roof. I mean, people are really, really hurting. We're going to have real questions about leadership in the city to deal with all of these problems.
And I would say leadership in the state as well, as we look to a new term of legislators coming in January, Nolan, who have to tackle a lot of budgetary issues and so much more.
$1 billion deficit now. It'll get worse. We don't have the luxury the federal government has of running a deficit to balance that budget. There's only two ways to do it. Three. You could grow your way out, you can tax your way out, or you could cut spending. And those are, the one you have very little control of. The other two are both very difficult choices.
And the other thing that is on my mind and looking in 2021 is education. And I'm really worried about how kids either start over, how school districts are dealing with it differently, that you're going to see even more disparities between districts and learning coming out of this pandemic.
I'd vaccinate teachers first. We got to get these kids back in school. It's not just their learning. You got a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, particularly among teenagers. These kids are suffering, and I would reserve those first vaccines for school teachers.
Yeah, I mean, this was a missed opportunity of the year. We do know how to make schools safe. We do know how to make sure that in-person learning was possible. We did not do the things that we needed to do to make sure that that was going to be true in every district. It takes an investment of some resources in some cases. There are, real different abilities across different districts in terms of what they were capable of. There was not enough planning and organization across districts to make sure that everybody was on the same page and everybody could do the same things. And so we started the semester with a hodgepodge of approaches.
Nolan, I think it's valuable that you brought up the mental health aspect of this, of our young people. And I would even say across the board, we have been forever rewired in our brains and how we deal with things and how we deal with crisis. So I'm going to kind of end on a little bit of a different note here. And I want to give each of you an opportunity. If you were in charge of the state of Michigan here, starting in January 21, what would be the three first important points or things that you would put at the top of your agenda?
Well, reopening the economy. We've learned a lot about the virus since the spring, and these restaurants, a lot of them have invested a lot in making their establishments safe and training their workers. I would put that on the top of the list. Obviously, getting that vaccine out there, and then I tackle our spending priorities, tackle our budget priorities.
Well, my first, I think, if I were the governor, would be that to refocus on schools. Let's get schools open. That is something, the CDC is saying we should have all schools, we should have all children going to school and not doing virtual learning. We just have to do it safely, and we know how to do it. The second, of course, is prioritizing vaccinations and making sure, Mayor Duggan said last week that he's really concerned about how quickly Detroiters, for instance, will be able to be vaccinated. Again, the gaps that exist in our society are playing out in the pandemic. We got to make sure that those gaps don't matter. I mean, this is life and death. And the third thing is, again, focusing on opening the economy, but doing it safely. We did reopen the economy at the end of the summer, and then we had another surge that required a response. We've got to be able to reopen and get enough people to do the things that they're supposed to do so that the disease does not start hospitalizing people again. We're at the same level of hospital overruns that we were in the spring. There's no reason that we need to be that way. You've got to figure out how to have a balance.
Well, there's a lot to tackle. And maybe in 2021, we'll all sit down within 6 feet of each other. I'm not sure,
Maybe fall. I'm thinking fall of 21.
Well, we'll have to see, but we will definitely keep it going. Nolan, Finley, Stephen Henderson, it's great to see both of you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And we will see you in 2021.
Yes.
Next up, Lieutenant Governor Garlin Ghilchrist. One Detroit's Will Glover had a conversation with him this week about his year and really his personal reflections, what he says his children have learned in 2020 and what we all have.
What was really important that got done this year by you guys?
Because of all that we've been through and because of, frankly, what we've had to do to survive this year, we've had to say so many goodbyes. We have had to do those goodbyes from a distance. We've had to even learn what social distancing is and had to practice it in order to be safe. And then my biggest takeaway, or one of my biggest takeaways, is that there's an irony inherent in that thing called social distancing. It actually reminds us about how valuable and important our connections to one another are. It magnifies their significance. And so my big takeaway is I think that we've seen people go out of their way to be creative, to find ways to take care of one another, to find ways to support one another, to find ways to be there for one another in a way that is safe. Because one of the sinister things about COVID-19 is that it has made the things that we do when times get tough, it has made those things dangerous. We come together, we break bread together, We go to places of worship together, and that has been made unsafe due to this virus. So I'm actually really proud of the way that people across the state of Michigan have tried to find ways to step up for one another. So I think that is an achievement in and of itself, because if we're thinking about how we can be better and more strongly connected going forward, that is going to strengthen our communities for the better. So that's kind of a qualitative thing, but I think that's really important. I think another a thing that the state of Michigan, I think, should really be proud of is the fact that, we have been able to slow the spread of this virus when we follow the experts and the advice that they've given us. We've seen that happen. And when it happened, one of the things I'm really particularly, I think, is worth noting is that the state of Michigan uniquely prioritized the most vulnerable people in the state, uniquely prioritized communities of color that were being killed at a higher rate from COVID-19. And because of that unique prioritization, because we chose to measure demographic data that included race and ethnicity, we chose to report it publicly. We were the first state to stand up a statewide task force that applied the full force of state government to flattening racial disparities.
As a leader, as the lieutenant governor of a state like Michigan, and as a Black man with children, how are you doing? How is not Lieutenant Governor Garlin Ghilchrist doing? How is Garlin Ghilchrist, the man with a family who is living in America as a Black man, doing? How do you feel right now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, as a parent, my kids have seen a whole lot of real life social studies this year. Okay. We live in Detroit. We can see Michigan Avenue from the window of our home. And so my children saw the George Floyd demonstrations happening in Detroit in real time, was able to show that to them. And they were asking, what are the people protesting for? And so being able to have those conversations with my 7-year-old twins has actually been pretty amazing. I'm also benefiting of the fact that my wife was a social studies teacher. So that's been really helpful on that front. When we've seen the violent protests, I was presiding over Senate session when armed men with long guns came into the Capitol and stood over the gallery with their guns in hand. 2 of those men actually being the ones who were involved in the plot to overthrow the government, storm the Capitol, blow it up, kidnap the governor, all those things. I saw those men with my own eyes. I've seen, unfortunately, what's happened when members of the Michigan legislature don't take COVID-19 seriously. I've seen, a member of the legislature who did wear a mask choose to wear a Confederate flag as his mask, the blatant symbol of racism and oppression and hatred in American history. So a lot has happened in 2019. But let me tell you what I'm excited about. More people participated in this presidential election than have ever participated in a presidential election in a very long time in Michigan. Now, the election, people voted for both sides, and I think that's great. I think democracy is important. But I actually don't think this election was chaotic. I think it was actually ran very well by our local election administrators. And I think it's going to lay a foundation for deeper and wider voter participation going forward. I'm excited about that. I want more people to vote. I want more people to participate in the democratic process and be civically engaged and civically minded. And so I hope that we continue that momentum, because that will lead to a better discourse, that will lead to better policy, and I think that will lead to better outcomes for Michiganders. So I welcome that. I'm excited about that. I was proud to lead work across the state of Michigan to encourage Black men to vote specifically in higher numbers, and it seems that we have done that. Demographically, the data is still being compiled there. And I think, again, we need to have more people from more communities be engaged, and that'll be better for all of us.
What are some of the state's New Year's resolution, and what is the best lesson that you've taken away from this year?
The lesson of 2021 needs to be that we are reliant upon one another. We are so interconnected that the actions that I take, that the choices that I make as an individual impact my community's collective health and collective well-being, collective economic potential. That has been made more clear to more people than it ever has been in any of our lifetimes. So I hope that we carry that forward and recognize that we have a responsibility to one another to make sure that we all have what we need to have a chance at being successful, to have a chance at survival in Michigan. So I think that that's just a principle that we need to hold in our minds and our hearts going forward.
What would you like people to have on their minds as they go into this holiday season, as they head into a new year? What do you want people to be thinking about and to carry on with them?
I want people to be thankful that they are able to celebrate a holiday, even if it is different. And I want them to be safe so that we can celebrate holidays going forward and make sure that you are investing in the safety of your loved ones by making the choice to be careful this holiday season. It is not worth the risk to lose a loved one, but instead you want that loved one to be there for the next holiday season.
And finally, the legacy of Hockeytown. The Red Wings have a fiercely loyal following here in Detroit and a storied history, but it was the 90s when they made their amazing Stanley Cup runs, and they couldn't have done it without the Russian Five, and they also changed U.S. hockey for good. The Russian Five documentary is airing here on Detroit Public Television Thursday, December 17th at 9 p.m. Here's a look.
The work ethic that is the Midwest, we have to outwork you. You went to Yale. I went to Central Michigan University. So I gotta outwork you.
You can't imagine what it was like in Detroit in 1982. The city was beaten, 17% interest rates, really high unemployment. You know, it was a mess.
I remember covering hockey games at Joe Louis Arena on what they called Devil's Night, the night before Halloween. And there were cars tipped over and burning, and that's what people remember about Detroit.
Back when Detroit was truly the Motor City, and in the 40s, they were jamming cars out of here. That's gone. You're living in a part of the country that everybody thinks is worthless. And the Red Wings have always been a salve for the city of Detroit.
The Red Wings won the Stanley Cup 4 times within a 6-year span with what has been called the greatest team of all time.
There hadn't been a championship in Detroit since 1955 during the glory years of Gordie Howe and the production line with Alex Del Vecchio and Ted Lindsay. Things really started to slide in the 70s and slid even further in the 80s.
When I got traded here in 71, things were out of whack pretty good. The Red Wings were buried so far down they couldn't see the top. And it was demoralizing for Wings fans, and you can't blame them.
There were no fans. There was no excitement. They were always referred to as the Dead Wings.
And I'm sure there was thoughts in this town, like, what's going to turn this thing around?
What was it like with the fellas in the room?
You know what? We had an unbelievable locker room. And I know, we obviously had, we had different personalities. We had different nationalities, but the one thing that we all shared was, our love for the game of hockey, passion for the game of hockey, and obviously being proud Detroit Red Wings. And really that's how we came together. And, the amazing thing when you look at the team that we had and the players that we had, guys going into the Hall of Fame, and there was really no ego in that dressing room and on the ice. Whoever scored, guys were happy for them. Whoever was getting the ice time or the power play or the penalty kill, it didn't matter. Guys were truly happy for one another. And that's, that was something that made us so successful in going back to back in 1997, winning the Cup, and then again in 1998.
And the Russian Five documentary airs here on Detroit Public Television on Thursday, December 17th at 9 p.m. Head to onedetroitpbs.org for more. That is going to do it for us. Enjoy your weekend, but make sure you come back and see us for One Detroit Arts and Culture on Monday night at 7:30. Take care and be well.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The KRESGE Foundation. Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Nissan Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you.